Hello and welcome to my guide for installing PFSense on Hyper-V. The reason I'm making this video is because I had a little bit of a problem with guest services not running on the VM, and that was just because I had to enable it. So if you're having problems with where you have to cycle the network adapters off and on, you'll just want to make sure that guest the guest VM services are enabled under settings, and I'll show you how to do that in the first minute of the video. So let's get started. So we're going to create a new virtual machine, giving it a name, which is largely irrelevant, but for me this is going to be my fourth router on the network, and I like to name it with what its host name is going to be, so I'm going to include the subdomain as well. I'm going to install it to the same generic location. It has to be a generation 1 VM because it doesn't support the iSCSI controller. You cannot enable dynamic memory allocation, because it'll just always allocate the startup menu memory anyways. So we're gonna give it 512 megabytes of RAM, which is a standard for an enterprise class router. You could probably even get away with a lot less unless you were gonna set up like clustered routers and have multiple different subnets running on the same router. So I'm gonna connect it to my external team. I'm gonna change the disk size down to 10. And we're going to install an ISO. Next, and finish. And then this is what I was talking about. You're going to want to go into the settings for the router and make sure that guest services under integration services are enabled. But we're also going to want to add another network adapter. And of course, this is all as of the time of recording the video. This is obviously subject to change with future releases. So right now it's connected to our external network via our teamed network adapters, and it's on our primary private network. So we're going to connect to the VPN. We're going to connect to the VM and then give it a good start. So we're going to start 1 for multi-user mode. And then if you pay close attention, we're actually just going to skip running it as a live VM. And when you get to here, where the timeout is, you can press I to do an install instead of running it live. We're going to accept defaults. We're going to do a quick and easy install. Accept. I'm going to do a standard kernel. I'm going to reboot. When it gets to here, I'm going to eject the media. Now it's very critical that you have everything pre-configured as far as the VM settings at this point. Like, as if to say, if you forgot the network adapter, you cannot bail out at the startup and then add the adapter and restart the VM, because there's no way to cleanly shut it down, and it will corrupt the configuration file, so you have to start from scratch. In the interest of time, I'm going to press F1 to just boot. I'm going to boot to the default, which is multi-user mode. So if you just didn't press anything, it would default to booting in that mode. Alright, cool. So we have the two network adapters. Oh, by the way, I did press enter there to get it to skip the IPv6 duplicate address error, which seems to be pretty standard with Hyper-V. I've never seen it to be a problem. I usually end up disabling IPv6 on the external adapter anyways, because it tends to break module downloads and sometimes updates, because it'll try and use the IPv6 address even if your external gateway doesn't support IPv6. So we're going to configure the WAN address, and if you look down here, our external TMO1, which is going to be our WAN address, is a MAC address ending in 16. So we're going to know that's HN0. And for the LAN interface name, if we do auto, it's going to default to HN1, but I like to do I like to specify it anyways, just in case I'm heading multiple different network adapters to create different internal subnets. And then we're not going to do a optional network. And we're going to proceed. Alright, so once we get to this point, it's already grabbed an IP address on the WAN interface via DHCP, which is what you want in most instances unless you have a static IP address. But I'll actually show you how to reconfigure the LAN address. And the process for changing the WAN address is basically identical. So we're going to change the interface IP addresses, which is 2. We're going to change the interface for LAN, which is 2. And then we're going to give it a LAN IP address of 10.5.1.1. And that's going to be a /24 network, which is to say all of the octets except for the last one are for networking, and the last octet is for devices. So I can do up to 254 devices. And because this is the LAN gateway, we're going to provide the upstream gateway, which in this case is alright, I'm sorry. So this is for the LAN, so we're not actually going to include the upstream gateway. I'm just going to do enter for none. If this was WAN, we'd want to give it the upstream gateway. So in my case, it's forwarding to R1 and R2, which are my primary clustered routers. And we're not going to enable IPv6, so none. And we are not going to enable DHCP because I have a few other interfaces on this network that are broadcasting DHCP. If you were setting this up like as your primary routing device, you'd probably want to enable DHCP for that. We don't want to revert to HTTP protocols for the web configuration. So what this is, by pressing no, it forces HTTPS on the web configuration, just in case you were to decide to throw network configuration over the internet. And then once that's done, I'm going to give it a reboot, which is also good to after you do a fresh install anyways, because it forces the save configuration file. -1. Multi-user mode. Alright, so I created a VM that's on the same physical adapter and in the same subnet as the new router. So default first login is admin and then the password PFSense. And don't. Alright, so next. So we decided this was going to be R4. And then my domain is index.us. Primary DNS server is 10.1.2.1. These are just my internal DNS servers. You can, if you don't provide anything and this checkbox is configured, it'll just use the DHCP DNS servers provided by your ISP, or otherwise you can just use, I recommend using Google's DNS resolvers, which are 8888 and 8844. NTP settings we're not too worried about. WAN interface is going to use DHCP. I am going to give it a static address. So yeah, so I'm not going to use DHCP. I'm going to use static in my case because I have several adapters on the network. And tracking these through Active Directory domain name services is kind of difficult. So we're going to give it the address 10.1.1.1.5, and that's on a /16 network. And the upstream gateway is 10.1.1. And next, the LAN interface we're going to leave the same, and then we're going to change the admin password. Alright, so that should cause the the web interface to reset, and now you get the dashboard.